All right, we can go ahead and get started. Hello everyone, and thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, Medical Illustration When Art and Science Collide. So for those of you who might not be familiar, medical illustration is a specialized field where professionals with a breadth of scientific knowledge and also have the skills in art create visuals to communicate specific scientific concepts to a specific audience. And oftentimes when you hear the words medical illustration, you might think of drawings in textbooks or the posters you see in doctors' offices, maybe even Frank Nutter. But the field is so much broader than that. Medical illustration can be further expanded to the term biomedical visualization. And this term really encompasses all of the other specialties that can be related to this field. Biomedical visualization can be also cellular animations or a set of infographics for a patient audience. Also a virtual reality simulation to teach surgical residents how to perform a particular procedure. So while the field of biomedical visualization might seem hyper-specific, there are thousands of applications within it that just beautifully merge art, science, technology, and communication. So in today's webinar, we'll be highlighting several different types of media that we use as visualizers to communicate these scientific topics with a variety of audiences. So my name is Eliza Stierle, and I am the president of SAMA and also a second-year student in the University of Illinois at Chicago's Biomedical Visualization program. And I will be hosting today's webinar with Dalena, who is SAMA's vice president, and Clara, who is one of our first-year representatives. So before we go ahead and start the webinar, I did want to introduce everyone to who we are in case you were unfamiliar with us as an organization. So the Student Association of Medical Artists is also known as SAMA. We are a student-run organization at the University of Illinois at Chicago, and we are interested in medical illustration and biomedical visualization fields. And we just wish to share more information about the field with those who might be unfamiliar and who want to learn more about it. So right now, all SAMA members are a part of the Biomedical Visualization graduate program, but we do welcome any current UIC students or prospective students to join our organization. I'll be handing it off to Dalena to go through the schedule.
Thank you, Eliza. Here's today's schedule. We'll be going over a variety of different topics related to the biomedical visualization field. A panelist will talk about each topic for 3 to 5 minutes, and the total presentation will be around 40 minutes long. After the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session with the panelists. I'll quickly go over a couple of housekeeping rules. Please remain muted while a panelist is talking. While someone is presenting, the other panelists will be monitoring the chat to answer any questions you may have. Please also feel free to introduce yourself. We would love to know where you guys are from and why you're attending today's webinar. This webinar is recorded and can be shared with you afterwards if you're interested in rewatching it later. And here is our panelists. We have 8 panelists today: Riley, Laurel, Nolan, Eyzel, Shanling, Delilah, Eliza, and Clara. I will now hand it off to our first panelist, Riley, a first-year student, and the new Beavis Student Council Vice President. She'll be going over the first topic of today's webinar, which is graphic design.
Thanks so much, Dalena, for introducing me. I'll start this webinar with a quick definition. So graphic design is defined as the art of conveying information in a deliberate and visual manner. It just so happens that when I wrote my application essays for grad school, I defined medical illustration as a mechanism to overcome barriers of education and language through visual problem solving and innovation. My definition is definitely longer-winded, but at its essence, it is the same. So the two fields just differ in the scope and topics they touch on. What does it mean to convey information deliberately? It means being intentional with every aspect of your design. So not only should it be visually interesting, it should also be accessible. As artists, we gravitate towards colors and styles we like and enjoy creating with. As medical illustrators, it's essential we take our audience into consideration at every step of the design process. We address a wide variety of audiences to include students, doctors, jury members, and the general public. All of these audiences have vastly different needs and medical literacy rates. Thus, we design differently for each of them. Some choices we can make with design include color, typography, and composition. Colors have deeply entrenched meanings, both culturally and generally. UIC's hospital branding actually uses teal in its logo, and this color can signify nature, clarity, open communication in Western cultures, which is pretty ideal to convey to incoming patients, but not necessarily consistent with other cultures. And then typography, it largely impacts readability. Typically, you see serif fonts with header text and sans serif with body text, or the reverse. I still mix them up and I'm a year in. Lastly, the composition. I always think of artists as conductors. We get to choose exactly where our viewers' eyes are going to go and how they're going to feel when they look at what we've made. So in our field, there are many, many, many roles to include branding and marketing. So for example, you might work on a social media campaign or commercials. With the design, particularly product design, you have to think in context of other marketed brands. So for example, Prilosec, which is a proton pump inhibitor for acid reflux patients, its big branded colors are purple and its competitor Nexium is yellow. So you get a huge contrast between these two brands that are making sure that they stand out against each other. At the end of the day, you have to use graphic design with every project and in every route you can take in this field. So I encourage you to think about the intentional choices that artists made in each artwork seen in this PowerPoint. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Riley. Laurel, a second-year student and current SAMA social media chair, will now talk about instructional design.
Hi, everyone. So I'm sure one of the first questions on your mind is, why are we putting graphic design as the first topic in a webinar about medical illustration? And that's a really great question. And the answer to that is we did it on purpose. Medical illustrators are professional artists and with an advanced education in life sciences and visual communication. And what we really understand is that harnessing good design principles is the first step in creating engaging and effective teaching materials. So instructional design isn't just creating instructional materials. I like to think about it as a mindset, and it can really be applied to medical illustration as a whole. It's a way of thinking and knowing the right questions to ask and finding the right tools for the job, much like Riley was talking about before. Medical illustrators are instructional designers at heart. We see an area of need and we solve it using a visual solution. So we think about our audience, who are they and how do they learn? What do they need to learn? We think about design theories, illustration, motion theories. We think about learning, psychology, and how all of those things can be used to effectively communicate with our audience. So on the right, you can see an illustration and poster that I've been working on personally. And this is a project that I worked with Professor Abby Breckling in the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology. We wanted to create a multimedia learning experience for her students so that they were more engaged with the really complex topics that they're learning about the brachial plexus. And it was super important that first we thought about our audience and we identified their needs and preferences so that we could create an engaging learning experience. So when you look at all of these figures before you, they are super different and they're all on incredibly different topics, right? And the thing that they have in common is these award-winning illustrations, most of them are, though you can see mine in the lower left corner, is the fact that they really had instructional design principles when they approached these projects. And they saw an area of need, and they identified a visual style and a format and design principles that were going to be most effective for that project to talk and teach about these topics. And the rest of this presentation will really dive deeper into different techniques and specialties that medical illustrators use like these for visual problem solving.
Thank you, Laurel. Next is our first year Viva student, Nolan, who will present on medical illustration.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Dalena. My name is Nolan. I'll be doing my presentation on medical illustration. So let's dive right in. So what is medical illustration? So the goal of medical illustrators is to create professional and compelling scientific visuals to communicate with broad audiences. Now, this is a pretty general definition, but really companies and organizations value our fields for being able to understand the science and teach it to a specific audience in an accessible way that where people are not overwhelmed with the information being given to them. So it's important for the artist to create visually appealing works that are also scientifically accurate. And a lot of background research is conducted for this, and it's common for the artist to engage with the scientific experts, as well as observe real life surgical and laboratory procedures with the purpose of creating this art. So here are some examples, some amazing artwork done by students and faculty here. And like with traditional art, medical art uses a lot of the same elements and principles throughout the process. What goes into making a piece successful can be a vast array of these principles and techniques. This includes things like perspective, color choice, line, shape, overall composition, and many more things. Now, what makes a good illustration? So that's going to be three different factors: your content, your storytelling, and your visual quality. So content usually pertains to things like accuracy and information quantity. Storytelling involves composition, audience, clarity, and accessibility. And your visual quality also pertains to draftsmanship, rendering quality, and thoughtful use of color and design. So next here, I wanted to showcase some other works that are unique in style. And on the left is a medical comic that I really liked. And on the right is editorial journal cover done by one of our students here for the American Journal of Bioethics. And as you can see, many of these pieces vary in style. Some may be more graphical, while others may be more realistic. And a lot of the time, illustrators must be thinking about a specific audience that they want to talk to with their work. So artistic choices may or may not be indicative of this, but at the end of the day, our works have a purpose to teach and inform in an accessible way. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Nolan. Next to present is Eyzel, a first-year student at the next CMF DEI chair. She will talk about medical legal visualization.
Hi, thank you for the introduction, Dalena, and thank you also everyone who's here, willing to listen to us all just kind of talk about this. So medical legal, what exactly is that? The job of a medical legal illustrator and or animator is actually to bridge the gap between the medical and legal fields. So this gap can be in communication and just understanding of kind of like the medical side of things and the legal side of things. So they do this by conveying the medical information to the jury members, the judge, and to others who are not a specific medical audience. And this is because in the courtroom, you kind of just have to understand, like the medical procedures, or if there was an accident, something like that, like what exactly happened. And the illustrator just basically needs to communicate that science and that medicine accurately, because the target audience, again, like judge, jury members, and others, are making really big decisions. So med legal illustrators actually do this by working with the attorneys, with the physicians, and with other medical professionals that know what happened and are a part of the case. And with the help of all of these professionals, the medical legal illustrator and animator will create visual aids. And these will be used in courtrooms and during legal depositions. So things that can be made include illustrations, animations, and even interactives. So the medical information can be portrayed differently just depending on what or who the audience is. And that also depends on what side the illustrator is on, which can either be the plaintiff or the defense. So for example, in a medical malpractice case, the plaintiff would be a patient who is maybe arguing that a mistake was made during their hospital care. Where on the other hand, the defense could be a physician that's saying, hey, no, like I followed the proper standard of care. Another example is a personal injury case where a plaintiff could be someone who got into any kind of accident and maybe needs a surgery of some kind, but maybe the insurance company is on the defense and is saying, hey, like you actually don't need surgery, like that wasn't necessary. But in either case, the illustrator on the plaintiff's side would most likely try to highlight and emphasize the pain aspect of the injury, whereas an illustrator that's on the defense side might want to make everything look very clean and simple. So there's just going to be a bit of difference in how things are rendered depending on, what side the illustrator is on. So the main parts of the actual job workflow are really emphasizing research and then illustrating or animating. So you'll work with attorneys that are going to be looking through the different medical and legal documentation. So this includes a lot of things. So for example, the operative reports, the emergency room reports, admission reports, the treating physician's office notes, or the discharge summaries. So all of that can be used to take in information on what exactly happened and things like those. So next, an illustrator would need to recognize and translate any of the anatomical structures that are in radiology. So they can look at X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, PET scans, and ultrasounds. So basically just looking at that radiology, identifying what was on there, and kind of translating that over to make sure that the person and the audience that is looking at this actually understands what happened. So all of that information is used to create exhibits. And one way to do this is by kind of what I already mentioned, is just analyzing the radiology images and perhaps tracing them and rendering them out. And that way the audience can visualize the injury better compared to just kind of looking at the radiology, because it might be hard to read if you don't know what to look for and you've never seen anything like that. And so rendering out the image actually helps with empathy, because it can show pain and maybe the suffering on one end. Although the amount of the gore and blood that is going to be rendered is different, which is part of what we talked about a bit earlier. So other forms of exhibits also include animations. So this can be used to show perhaps like a surgery procedure or how an accident occurred. And basically in the field, you're organizing, you're designing, you're illustrating or animating some sort of complex medical content, and you're making it easier to understand through the specific story that you're trying to convey. So in order to be a med legal illustrator or animator, it's kind of important to have a strong understanding of anatomy, of medical concepts and terminology, and legal procedures, just because that's part of the work that you're doing. And it's also important to be able to work in a fast-paced and deadline-driven environment.
Thank you, Eyzel. Eliza, who introduced the webinar earlier, will now talk about 3D modeling.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Dalena. So before I kind of start talking about 3D modeling, I wanted to just re-highlight something that Eyzel said about our process as medical illustrators. So a lot of times when we're presented with a project, we do have a base knowledge of whatever subject that it is. However, it does require a lot more research to go into whatever it is that we're doing. So for example, I wanted to show three samples of a 3D model that I had developed in 3 different presentations. But to actually create this model, I had to start by doing extensive research about the bones and how they relate to each other. So I was going back into my notes from gross anatomy. I was reading textbooks and research papers and journal articles. And then from there, it was a lot of sketching and looking at real set of bones that our program gave us to look at. And then from there, we actually go ahead and start developing those compositions. And once we get that done, it's a lot of compositing to show the information in a variety of ways. So this 3D model in the top left corner, you can see this is a very simple anatomical presentation of it. So I wanted to have a simple still image that highlighted just the different bones and ligaments and how they were related to each other. But also a 3D model could be something that is actually used in 3D space. So the video that you saw on the right, that can also be used. It's another presentation of highlighting that anatomy, but in a 3D way, so the viewer can have a more comprehensive understanding of those structures and how they relate to each other. But then also at the bottom, you see those two blue images of the knee in a circle. And that model was actually imported into Unity, and we developed a interactive app to highlight common injuries that happen with the knee. So this is, again, just 3 different presentations of how 3D models can be used at the gross anatomical level. Next slide, please. But also, so models don't always look as beautiful as they are when they are in this final composited stage. They might look something like this, which you'll see. They start with, we start by either box modeling or sculpting these models in a variety of 3D programs. We use Blender, 3ds Max, Maya, Cinema 4D, ZBrush. There's pros and cons to each of these programs, and depending on what our story is and how we're planning on using it, this might determine how we actually pick those programs. But also in terms of sculpting, we also need to look at a couple other elements. If you could press the next image. Depending on what materials and things like that you add, it can affect the render times. As you can kind of see in the top right corner of that far right image, you see that green bar that's going. As you add more elements and more materials, that can really add a lot of time to develop these renders. And if you're using these models for animations, like in the image all the way to the right, it's important to kind of keep in mind what materials and lights you apply to an image, because it could take 60 hours to render an animation that's only an hour long, or only a minute long. So just depending, these are good things to consider. Next slide. But 3D models can also be used for editorial purposes. As you can see in the bottom right hand corner, you see several pieces of hardware that are used in a knee replacement surgery. And Delilah actually created these models to be used in an animation. But at this stage, Delilah used her background in lighting and lighting to actually create a elegant scene here of these devices. So I don't know, medical illustrators really do come from a variety of different backgrounds, and that's one of my favorite things I think about being in this field and in this program, is just seeing how people's backgrounds and experiences really reflect into their work. Just because people really have come from all kinds of places and have so many different sets of skills. Next slide, please. But not only can 3D models be used in games and animations, it also can be used for educational posters. So there's a variety of deliverables that these models can be used in. But there's also a variety of scientific topics they can also be utilized for. So these models here are both created in ZBrush and then composited, I believe, in 3ds Max in both cases. But as you can see, the top left image is more of a life science presentation of all of the applications of the silk that silkworms produce. Whereas also the lower right-hand corner really is more about the anatomical story of ovulation to implantation, and it even kind of gives some insight to the cellular level. So 3D modeling has thousands of applications that can be used. Some people can also use these models as reference for illustrations later on. So yeah, 3D modeling is a really powerful tool used within this field.
Thank you, Eliza. First year student Shanling will now go over molecular visualization.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I'm Shanling, and I'll be talking a little bit about molecular visualization. Molecular visualization, as defined by the name, is the process of creating visual conceptualizations of science at the cellular and molecular levels. This can involve all types of media that were covered before and will be covered after my section, such as modeling, animation, and illustration. But the science here in molecular visualization is specific to the cellular and molecular level. And the first step and the most important part in molecular visualization requires a highly knowledgeable medical illustrator to understand the science themselves. And this is because the science on the molecular level is far more abstract than on the gross anatomy level. So this requires the artist to have a firm understanding of the science themselves before they're able to even begin to interpret how to visualize it. And they need to understand how to simplify these complex topics in a way that can be communicated to the intended audience. And this audience can range from other scientists who may not specialize in molecular biology to students learning cell and molecular bio, or even to the general public who have little knowledge of scientific terminology at all, and all of whom have different background knowledge and different learning goals. So a good molecular piece, a good molecular visualization piece will be able to deliver accurate science to the target audience in a way that the audience can understand it. It will also not overload the viewer with information or complexity, because the representation, or how the molecule, the process, the mechanism of action is visualized, is determined by the scope and the audience. Some examples of pieces that use molecular visualization are graphical abstracts, which serve to delineate information from a research paper for a viewer to grasp the most important points at a glance, or didactic images like the ones you see in textbooks, as exemplified in the lower right. They can also be highly rendered molecular posters educating the audience on structure, binding, and function of certain molecules. It can also be animations, editorial pieces, or research article figures. Think of pharmaceutical advertisements or mechanism of action videos that you may have seen in cell bio or physiology. This here is an example that was created by a student to show the binding mechanism between a SARS-CoV-2 spike protein and the ACE2 receptor. And that's all for my section. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanling. Our next presenter is Clara, a first-year BEVA student and a new BEVA Student Council president. She will now go over medical animation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Dalena. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for attending today. We're so excited that you've all joined. And as Dalena said, I'll be covering the wonderful avenue of medical animation. So first, what is medical animation? It's often defined as a short film that focuses on a medical topic through beautiful and accurate visuals and motion. Animation, like most medical illustration pieces that we've discussed today, focus on a specific audience and goal. They can be used for patient and student education, professional training, and promotional materials such as pharma companies, researchers, or medical equipment. Within the field of medical animation, there's really such a wide variety of artistic styles, design choices, and a vast number of scientific topics that a medical animator can use or highlight in an animation. And this makes the field of medical animation just full of opportunities as an artist. Many of the techniques and art styles showcased in the webinar today can play a huge role in making a great medical animation. So just to go over a few here, there are 2D animations, which you can see on the bottom left of the screen, which focus on a more simplified art style and are often used in patient or student education materials. Both images on the right of the screen showcase 3D animations, which are a branch of medical animations that really help orient a viewer in a more dimensional environment while depicting the scientific topic in a highly accurate way. Molecular animation, which Shanling highlighted, is seen on the bottom right and is another form of animation which focuses on visualizing complex molecular topics in an accurate and very clear way. And then we have medical legal animation, which Eyzel touched on, and it's really just used within courtrooms to help either the defense or prosecution teams better visualize the injury at hand for the jury. And to finish off, both educational and promotional medical animations fall within any of these artistic styles listed above. So we can really see from this broad variety of medical animations listed here that the amount of opportunity and necessity for animations within the medical world is really exciting and inspiring. So kind of to bring it to the real world, most of us are exposed to short films all the time, whether that be watching reels on Instagram, TikTok, a Pixar short film, or a YouTube tutorial on a science topic. Many films and animations are successful because they follow specific cinematic techniques that aid in amazing storytelling, help evoke emotion from the viewers, and just create beautiful visuals in general. So what makes a great medical animation? Medical animators often focus on specific techniques used within the industry to produce really meaningful, accurate, and captivating animations for the target audience. Some animation techniques that are practiced include first identifying and really understanding your audience and their needs, storytelling through storyboarding and script writing, which many of us see as a whole nother art form that's encompassed within animation, and you can see that in the top right of the screen. Effective camera movement via timing and pacing of the animation frames, lighting and materials, which are often incorporated and developed within the creation of your 3D models that Eliza previously mentioned. And there's really just a large amount and of a large variety of other specific cinematic techniques that medical animators use. So students within the BViz program take a variety of animation classes that are offered here if they're interested in going down the field of medical animation. Many of the students compile pieces from various parts of their animations into a demo reel. So to give you guys an example of the amazing animations created by various BViz students, there are 2 demo reels we would like to share with you all first. The one you're watching right now is Avon's demo reel. She is a second-year student in the BViz program who's gone through many animation courses here at UIC and BViz. So you can see that the camera motion, the color palettes, lighting, and materials that she uses within her animations are really all intentional and specific design choices and techniques to help convey the story at hand to her intended audience. The next demo reel we would like to showcase is by Delilah, another super talented second-year student here at BViz. Delilah really showcases a variety of styles and techniques within her animations, which I thought was just a great example to show you all today, because she has a specific audience in mind or a story to tell in each of these animations, which lends her to choose different animation styles or technical cinematic choices to really tell the story in the best way possible to her audience. So just to finish off, to me, the coolest thing about medical animation is that it often takes the audience to a place that a physical camera couldn't. We can study molecular structures in action or how neurons synapse in the brain, which just allows the audience to learn about structures that would otherwise be really, really hard to visualize from reading a journal article. So the field of medical animation is just so exciting as it's filled with endless opportunities to have real creative freedom in what you produce and inspire the audience to learn more about science through beautiful art. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. Our final topic for today's webinar is on VR and games, and will be presented by Delilah, a second-year BViz student and current CMA DEI co-chair.
Thanks, Dalena. Yeah, I am really excited about games as a concept because often it's overlooked when we talk about biomedical visualization, or people tend more to talk about like serious games like surgical VR simulations and those sort of things. But I've chosen to showcase some student projects that I think really bring out the fun side of biomedical visualization. And first off, we should have a conversation about why we use games to teach concepts, like why games in particular, what can they do that other forms of medium maybe can't? So first of all, obviously, gamification. Gamification is taking the mechanics that we recognize from games. So this can be multiplayer, it can be scoring, it can be timed elements, platforming, all the kinds of things that are in the games you know and love and play in your own homes. and using these to really pair with learning goals. So here you can see that this is an app developed by some of our current first-year students. So they have learning goals to showcase different levels of magnification and cross-sections in the stomach. And they were able to use the game mechanics of being able to zoom in, rotate, animate elements to really drive home the points that they were trying to make with the layers, the motion, and the ability to like see the 3D capabilities of the object. They also allow you to incorporate multimedia and interactive learning, which just tends to be more fun in general, like especially when stacked on top of gamification. People really like interacting with the things that they're viewing. And sometimes people will get more information out of something if they're able to see the feedback and interact with the objects inside of it. And also games are just, they're fun. They're fun to play, they're fun to see, they're fun to make. Next slide. So first up, we have a VR game that was worked on by some of our second-year students. And in this one, ooh, is she frozen or is she thinking? In this one, you are playing as an avocado, doing an operation on another avocado. And you have to fight these hot pepper ghosts as you're walking through the hospital, which is a little bit of a fun way to get people used to using the game controls and the game mechanics. So as you're moving through this hospital, you're learning how to use the VR controllers because it's something some people might not be familiar with. And you're also learning the mechanics of, oh, you can interact with objects, you can scrub up the goo that these ghosts drop, which then brings you into this scene where you are able to do something that's maybe a little more typical in a biomedical visualization space and learning medical skills. So in this one, you are asked to scrub in to perform a surgery on another avocado. So you can see that you've taken these like skills that you've learned in interacting with objects in the previous area, and now you're learning real actionable things that can be used in real life if you decide to go into surgery and into performing surgeries. And part of the reason we use VR simulation type things for patient care especially is it has a very low risk associated with it compared to learning on patients. So this one is a little bit of a sillier interpretation, but many companies and hospitals do actually train their surgical staff on VR or gamified or interactive platforms first, so that by the time they get to patients and they get to treating patients, they have all of their skills locked in and constructed beforehand. Next slide. This one is a little bit more whimsical. This is one called Undersea Eatery, also constructed by some second-year students. So in this VR game, you are a crab. I called it a VR first-person crab game because first-person shooter game is kind of a terminology, and I thought it was funny. But in this one, you are not only exploring as a crab, which is just fun. It's something you wouldn't get to experience normally, but it's also teaching you about the ecosystem of these underwater vents near this trench. So you're learning about a little bit of the molecular chemistry and also about just the lifestyles of these crabs and their interactions with the environment around them, and in particular, these hot vents. So just a very cool representation that allows you to explore areas that you might not have access to. Next slide. In this one, I would guess that many of you have heard of Darwin and his finches. But if you're not familiar, Darwin discovered that finches on a particular island in the Galapagos really developed differently and developed different physical characteristics to better acclimate them to interacting with the environments around them. So in this game, you play as a scientist running around this open world island, interacting with the birds. So here you can see some elements of a previous topic we talked about, which is animation. So this scientist was animated, their little run cycle, and then imported into the game. And then here we really reinforce the learning goals of constructing these phylogenetic trees. So the birds that you discover can be placed into this tree based on their characteristics, and it will tell you information about why they may have developed that way. Next slide. Next up, we have a project that is very near and dear to my heart. This is Chicago Grow, and it's a game that I worked on. So in this game, we are teaching you about maybe some more real world resources, but gamifying it with fun characters to interact with and mini games inside of the game. So during this game, you meet your neighbors and they assign you tasks that you could perform in a real world situation in which you were building a rooftop garden in the city of Chicago. So you learn about native plants, you learn about constructing planters, and best practices for gardening on rooftops. And our hope when we made this game was that people would move forward with the sustainability message and maybe seek out some of the things that they saw in the game in real life, just to kind of promote our sustainability message and kind of make it seem fun also. Next slide. And last but not least, the Night Shift is a game that I would say 75% of Beavis students that are currently at the school worked on, which was just a fantastic experience. But in this game, we really wanted to drive home our learning goals with the mini games that we put into the story. So in the overarching narrative of the game, you are playing and helping a handyman inside the body of somebody who is sleeping at night. And at night, a lot of repair sort of processes occur. And we wanted to highlight 4 of these processes. So we take you through mini games that represent memory coding, digestion, immune response, and also bone remodeling, which are all very real life things that the body can go through. And this is a completely playable game that will inform you about these processes and also let you just enjoy them and have fun learning about them. That is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Delilah, and thank you to all the panelists for presenting today's webinar. Here are our contact information for all the panelists and moderators for today. If everyone is interested, we're more than willing to talk to you guys after the webinar, so just feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or would like to learn more about each different topic. And I'll also include our contact information in the chat. And here are some more useful links related to the biomedical visualization field or art in general that we want to share with all our attendees today. I also want to point out that all of these skills that we learn can be taught through graduate programs like the Beavis program, and there's a variety of other graduate programs throughout the nation. And as long as you have a continuing learning interest in learning, and you can be really successful in this field, and it could be very rewarding. I'll now hand it off to Clara.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And so we're going to begin the Q&A session. So if you have any questions at all, we would love if you would type them in the chat if you haven't done so already. And if you are comfortable with speaking, you can also raise your hand and we would love to call on you. So you can take maybe a few minutes right now to type out some questions that we could answer for you.
We should have queued up some Jeopardy music.
Okay, we've got a first question, and any of the panelists feel free to jump in and answer, but someone just asked, which programs do you use for 3D modeling, for like the 3D modeling part?
I can answer that question.
Awesome.
So Beavis as a program has gone under a lot of change in what technologies we use. A lot of companies use different technologies, including Cinema 4D, 3ds Max, Blender, and there's ZBrush, there's about 5. Currently, we learn Blender, which is an open source software and a really great interface because it's very beginner friendly. And then we're transitioning into Cinema 4D and ZBrush.
Riley, and if you could pop those in the chat, that would be great, just a list of them.
I'm already on it. I'm typing.
Oh, thanks, Delilah.
Thanks, Delilah.
And
I think we should also mention that you don't need to know any of these programs to apply to Beavis. I came in with 0 experience in 3D, and the courses really prepare you for all the work that you've seen here you can do it too. It's possible. It's very achievable. So just keep that in mind.
That's such a great point, Laurel. So you can, like we've mentioned in the webinar, a lot of us have come from such different backgrounds. So wherever you're at, if you're interested in this field, it is possible. Our next question from Emma, she asked, do you have a favorite BVIS course you've taken so far? We have quite a wide variety of courses, so I'd love to hear from some of you guys.
Not to talk about the subject that I just talked about, but I really think that the game development courses that I've taken here have really like expanded my horizons of what biomedical visualization can mean. And also it makes you like think differently because you're working so like literally with like, this is my game mechanic and this is my learning goals. Here's how I make them work well together and make them play together. And also like making sure that you're keeping things fun and engaging to learn, I think is just like a fun challenge and something that everybody should be cognizant of when they're working on things like game development.
To add on to Delilah's answer, I've so enjoyed game dev, not only because it's a very fun topic, but also because I'm working in group projects. And this is the first time that I've loved being a part of group projects. I'm surrounded by people I'm constantly inspired by and enjoy working with, and seeing what we can make that I would never have been able to do it on an individual level through our combined expertise is really rewarding. And you do group projects outside of game dev, but this has been my favorite.
Awesome. And yeah, just to add on, another course that we offer, it's called Visual Learning and Thinking 1. And then we have a second course as well, which our director, Leah, leads both of those courses. And as we've mentioned in the webinar, it is really a background of trying to understand our audience, trying to understand learning theories and how we apply those to all the projects that we do here at BVIS. So that course is definitely more of a thinking course, reading a lot of learning theories from past psychologists or even studies within the psychology field. And so that course is really rewarding because we might not be producing awesome 3D models or amazing games, but it really infiltrates into every project and our research that we produce or work on day to day. So we have a lot of questions popping up, which is so exciting. The next question is maybe a little bit difficult, Audrey asks, for some of you guys to answer, but at this point, especially the second years, what is it like trying to find work after graduation? So maybe touch on the points of where are you looking, maybe what companies you are looking into.
This is a fun, scary, relevant question right now because a lot of the second years are currently searching for jobs. I don't know if this is universal across programs and I can't speak for them, but our program does a really great job of presenting us with job opportunities that they see and also with connecting students to people that they can work with. In general, lots of universities and hospitals will have research divisions that might have an internal like medical illustration studio. There's like the typical pharma medical. There's also some smaller companies that might be working more on like graphical medicine, like the comic that Nolan showed earlier. And there's some really fun game development studios. So basically we're qualified for a lot of things and the world is kind of your oyster. And a lot of us are just trying to write all of our applications right now and see what happens.
Yeah, I would like to also add on the Association of Medical Illustrators too. They do a really great job of continuously like updating their job board and things like that. So yeah, while it is a very specific field, there's thousands of different types of jobs available within it. You know, you become like an animator, you know, a developer. There's, you know, a bunch of different great options too.
Yeah, I asked this coming in, and I think that his statistic was 95% of BVIS alumni find a job within the first year. And I think that last 5% typically freelances. So there's stuff out there.
I also just want to throw in that I feel like our education and our experiences really allow us to work with a lot of different people. So not only do I feel like I'm qualified for a lot of different jobs, I've had the chance to work with a lot of different departments and just with a lot of different topics and people. So I feel like, I have experiences that'll lend me to kind of the jobs that any job that I really apply to. So.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Eyzel, for answering some of these questions in the chat as well. But maybe to get a few other opinions too, Adrian asks, could these skills be taken to industries outside of pharma or medical? Which that's such a great question.
I know that our second year students are kind of looking at a variety of jobs, and I like sending jobs to people where I'm like, wow, this would be perfect for you. So we've got I feel like you can pretty much go into anything that you can justify with like your artistic skills and your ability to do research, which someone also asked a question about, so I won't talk about it too much. But there are definitely a lot of spaces that you can go into, pretty much anything that has sort of an educational focus. Viva students are really well suited to. So although we're really well trained in like medicine and science and pharma to an extent, like I feel like I already said the world is your oyster, but yeah, you can pretty much use the skills that you learn in this to go into any adjacent field, I would say.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I mean, medical illustration or the field of biomedical visualization is such a growing field that so many companies who never thought they needed a medical illustrator or a medical animator realize that they do, and that it's a very viable profession within marketing or, like Eyzel talked about, legal situations. And so there's a lot of opportunities that might not have a position opening for a medical illustrator, but that's just because they don't realize that they could really benefit from one. So there's a lot of options out there.
I think also someone mentioned in the chat that we're also good art directors and project managers. And this is something I'm particularly interested in. And I think our knowledge of science and research, and also our knowledge of art and how to create art, is really, really niche and wonderful, because that means that we can be a part of a team and say, hey, we understand how this works and this is how we need to get things done. And so I feel like there are also those avenues. So you don't just have to be an artist going out of this program, you can also be a manager as well. And I feel pretty set up for that. So.
Awesome. And then we have a question in the chat. How important is medical illustration in teaching materials for young people today? And they also ask, is it necessary to have a degree in medicine to practice medical illustration?
I can hop onto this. I think it's even more important today to have visuals, because we are such a visual culture where everybody's on TikTok and Instagram, and visuals are how we convey information in a quick time. And so I think our job is only becoming more essential, especially as knowledge on medicine and every topic is changing every day. So there's a constant need to update pieces and visuals. And then I don't think any of us, very few, have come in with specifically, say, a doctorate in medicine or an undergrad degree in medicine. You have a pretty big mix between art majors and biology majors. And once you get in your second semester in the fall, and this is the same for all programs, you will be taking a medical student level anatomy course. So you will be caught up even if you don't have previous experience on it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Riley. And we have a question that says, how do you choose your area of specialization? So any of kind of like the fields we talked about today, or do you all dabble a little bit in everything here at BViz?
I feel like I want to jump in on this one, because I feel like I'm notoriously known as someone who's very specialized right now in graphic design and illustration. So I personally have specialized, but I think a lot of people in our program are generalists, and I think Eliza wants to speak on this a bit more.
Yeah, I feel like I have a good bit of experience being being a generalist. So like I came into the program with almost exclusively traditional drawing experience. And I feel like that did set me up really, really well for learning a variety of different media that the program does offer. And I've loved animation and 3D modeling, and game development's been so much fun. And I've also really enjoyed the experience that I've gotten with art direction and project management. And for me individually, I would really be interested in pursuing any of those as a career. However, it also did just reiterate that I love illustration at the end of the day. So for me personally, like I am very happy that I was able to get all of those experiences, and that has really informed my work, my illustration work in particular. So yes, you can choose a road to go down. You can kind of be more of a generalist. But yeah, there's a lot of really great experience out there in either pathway. And for me, it did just kind of reiterate that, I do just love drawing at the end of the day too. So that's what grad school is about, getting new experiences that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to otherwise.
I would say on top of that, as someone who is just now choosing what route they want to go down, that you are limited in terms of time and bandwidth. And so you do have to choose classes that you don't want to take. So next fall, you can take advanced illustration or advanced graphic design. And I was looking at my schedule and all the things I wanted to do. And I had to decide to not take advanced illustration just because I thought I would get more out of the other class. So you can generalize, but with the caveat of making sure to take care of yourself and not have too many classes, because I think a very common problem for people in our field is that we want to do everything amazing all the time. And at the end of the day, we are only going to be paid for so many hours of work. And so reeling yourself in and understanding that early is important.
I just want to jump in real quick. There are a variety of classes that's available through our program specifically, but there's also an option to take independent studies with different faculty members if there's a course that you are unable to take during the summer, or if you want to dive into something very specific. Some people are interested in, like Laurel, she did some presentations for the anatomy department. I did some independent study with Blender. I was trying to prepare for my research on like a 2.5D animation. And there's just more options. People are interested in comics, they can work on comics. It's really up to you how you want to specialize or how to develop your curriculum.
Awesome. And then Delilah kind of answered this super well in the chat already, but I think it would be cool to hear from some of your perspectives, especially relating to our research or how we handle this as students. It says, I've heard of some resident illustrators / animators who work with people in academics like professors, scientists, doctors. How common is this? And then are there dedicated positions for illustrators or animators in academic institutions or research centers, which Delilah gave an awesome list, but maybe some of you could touch on like who you're working with your research or opportunities that you've had to work with specific doctors or departments within or at UIC.
Really quick, I forgot to say it in my chat because I forgot, I guess. But I am also currently working with the School of Nursing at UIC to develop textbook illustrations for an open educational resource textbook. So they also provide us opportunities to work with medical professionals, and I'm currently working with a professor of nursing pharmacology to develop these, like not only the illustrations that you're making, but also the skills of working with professionals in the field too. So, but yeah, a lot of universities, hospitals, all those kind of programs, all those kind of places have medical illustrators, either in-house or ones that they associate with or contract out to.
I guess to talk a little bit more about the research process here at BViz, I'm not totally sure about the other programs, but for us, it usually goes two ways in our research classes. We have researchers and other professionals that have projects in mind come into class and they present to us, and some students pick those projects for their project research. And then other students, kind of like me, have seen an area of need or a project that they want to work on, and then they follow that avenue. So there really is a lot that you can do and a lot of people you can connect with for your content advisor for your research. So there really are a lot of options.
Awesome. And then I'm so sorry, I'm just really realizing this now. Sarah, I saw you had your hand raised. Did you want to ask a question to everyone?
I did. Hello, and thank you for this. This has been fantastic. And I'm just curious, I know a lot of people, when you were showing their backgrounds, they were double majors in biology and art. And I know, Eliza, that was part of your background as well. If someone is exclusively an art major or exclusively a bio major, how will they do in the program?
I can go ahead
or
and
yeah,
answer that question.
awesome. Absolutely.
Yeah, so obviously I was a double major in both studio art and biology, but people in our program come from all kinds of different backgrounds. We've had people that have majored in English, computer science, linguistics, psychology. We have a girl in my class that did fiber and textile BA at MICA. And I would say like the most important thing is just to have a strong art portfolio. So you like, as long as you do understand those like strong principles, you'll be successful in the program. And also there are a set of science classes that are required to get into these graduate programs. It's like a lot of upper level biology, some A&P classes, things like that. And I would say the people in my class in particular, people who have a strong art background, they might have to work a little bit harder and do a little bit more research on the science side, but also the people that were, chemistry undergraduate students, they have to do a little bit more work on the art side to understand composition and color theory. And I found that this field in general is a really, just the people in it are so helpful. So we've all really kind of like leaned in on one another to help each other out. If, one of us don't have a strength that another one has, we all really do a great job of helping each other out within it.
Awesome, thank you.
I can comment a little bit as someone who double majored in 2 sciences, and I never took actual art ever. I only had like a private instructor about 4 months before I sent my application in. So I think I definitely am lacking in terms of technical skill with art, but because I'm self-taught, I have like my own style that I've been really comfortable with. And I think that fits really well because I am interested in molecular visualization, which is in itself very conceptual and very graphical. And I think because I've spent so much time on my own, drawing my own type of art, that's actually helped me in developing molecular visualizations. And also I have a very strong science background, so reading through tons and tons of scientific papers is like nothing to me. I enjoy it. I love reading about molecules and physiology, mechanism of action. It's tedious work, but I definitely enjoy it because I spent so long doing it. But yeah, depending on your skill set you come in with, there is a way for you to fit it together and find a place that makes you happy.
Awesome. So maybe some of us can touch on the application process to BViz specifically, obviously, or any other programs that we applied to, because there's a question, how can I become a competitive applicant for medical illustration graduate programs, besides kind of working on your portfolio pieces and taking those science prereqs? Were there any extra steps that you guys did to make your application strong?
I want to jump in because I just want to say I didn't get in the first time. I applied to all the schools and I didn't get in, but I think one of the things that I want to say helped me was that I reached out to all of them and I said, hey, why didn't I get in? Is there someone I can speak to who can help me with my portfolio? Are there students I can talk to who can give me advice? And all of the programs were really receptive, and especially BViz. I spoke to our director, Leah Leibowitz, and she put me in contact with some students here. And that, I think, was what really helped me, because then I was able to get some really direct feedback on my portfolio. And then I was able to work on the areas that I was lacking, because I was in a traditional space and I really was like more focused on my science background. So having that extra feedback and also showing that I was really, really interested by reaching out, you're showing that, hey, I'm super, super interested in your program. And I think that goes a long way as well.
Adding on to what Laurel was talking about, I also reached out quite a bit to both the former and current director, Leah, as well as students, and talking to them about their experiences was really informative. All of the, to my knowledge, all of the programs have outreach events that you can attend. And I know for sure that both UIC and Toronto offer portfolio reviews in advance. So having the advantage of time to really plan out your portfolio and come up with unique ideas for application problems, I think was my biggest strength, just being able to plan all of that out. And then that way you can also get feedback before your first application as well.
I wanted to comment. I have something a little bit different. I think what helped me, not just reaching out, but like aside from science and art, I think one of the most important things is being intentional in your art. So what helped me a lot is I took a course on UI UX, which was all about design. Like whatever your product is, that's for your end user. And in our art, in the pieces we create, our art is not just made for us to look at it to look pretty. All of our pieces serve a purpose. They're there to deliver some sort of scientific information to an audience. So kind of looking into the design mindset and making sure as you're creating art, you're keeping that in mind, who you're designing for, who you're drawing for, and what you're trying to, the story. What story you're trying to tell, that is very important. And if you go into developing your art with that mindset, then your art is going to come out differently than if you were to just do it for fun or do it just because. And the people who are reviewing your applications, if you write about it, or even if you are just making your art with that mindset, they can tell because it comes out differently than otherwise.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And just to like add on, I think the whole reason why I wanted to get into this field is that this art form for us is, I always thought of it as art with a specific purpose. All art has a purpose, so I'm not trying to slam any other art field, but especially with as people who love science and we want to help people, we want to help researchers. This field just has such a rich purpose for any medical illustrator or animator. And so, like Shallie said, realizing the purpose of each project that we work on and focusing on that purpose in every step of our design making and our design choices is just really rewarding. So I did want to point out, I hope I haven't missed any questions, but Laurel mentioned it, and all of us are more than happy to answer any further questions. We will be sending out the PowerPoint with all of our contact information, but please feel free to follow us on our socials, email us. You can easily DM us, and we would love to talk to any of you about the application process or the field in general. That's what we're here for, and that's really the point of this webinar, is just to give a shout out to the wonderful field of medical illustration and biomedical visualization. So it just popped into the chat. If anybody wants to like screenshot that or copy that. All of our contact information is there, and we are all here to answer any questions whenever we can. So we have, let's see, one more question. Is there any specific sources you recommend for basic art fundamentals for people that are self-taught?
As someone who was self-taught, I can speak to this a little bit. The main thing that I had difficulty finding resources for, because YouTube is fantastic for a lot of things, was figure drawing. So if your college doesn't offer a figure drawing course, there are some excellent online resources. So the one that I used is called Croquis Cafe. I'll type it in the chat unless somebody else knows how to spell it also. And also, if you look in your city or your town or something surrounding you, I was able to Google, like I went to school in Rochester, New York. I was able to Google Rochester, New York figure drawing. And I found a couple of different studios and places that offered figure drawing classes for like a small fee. So I think that that's one of the skills that if you don't have it at your school, you will have to seek out. But there are resources and you will be able to find them, I believe in you.
Awesome. I just want to ask before we start concluding this meeting, does anybody have any other questions? Would like to raise a hand or shout out a question before we start concluding? Awesome. Well, I hope we answered all of your guys' questions. I hope I didn't miss any in the chat. Thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to everybody who attended today. This is just so fun for us to be able to give a little shout out to the wonderful field of biomedical visualization, and especially our BVIS program in SAMA. We want to thank anybody who's attending from our undergraduate programs. You've obviously shaped where we are today, so we appreciate you for attending. And we hope that this was inspiring and answered a lot of your questions. Again, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us at any time. We are all very active and often awake when we shouldn't be. So we will respond. But we're just so delighted to have you guys. Thank you so much for your time today. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday and week and enjoy the sunshine.